The girl I was. To understand what was stolen, you have to know who I was at 17. I was the success story of our neighborhood. I was the captain of the debate team, a straight-A student, and I had just received a full-ride scholarship to a top-tier university. My father, a man who worked 60-hour weeks in logistics to give us everything, looked at that scholarship as his greatest achievement. I was his golden girl. I was weeks away from high school graduation, dreaming of law school and a life of my own. I didn't know that my mother was currently drafting a script that would turn me into a social pariah for the next 7 years. 2. The ambush. The talk didn't happen with tears or a motherly hug. It happened in the kitchen at 2 o'clock in the morning, while my dad was sleeping. My mother sat me down with a cold, clinical look in her eyes. She told me she was pregnant by Mr. Sterling, my dad's boss. She didn't ask for my help, she presented a demand. She told me that if my dad found out, he would leave, we would lose the house, and our lives would be over. Then came the knife. She told me I was going to claim the baby. When I fought back, she told me that if I didn't go along with it, she would tell my dad that I was the one who was sneaking out, and that she had been covering for me. She turned my father's trust in her into a cage for me. 3. The silicone prison. My mother was clinical about the mechanics of the lie. She ordered 3 different medical-grade silicone pregnancy bellies, small, medium, and large, to ensure the progression looked natural to the neighbors and my father. I spent my senior year of high school strapped into a rubber stomach. I remember the smell of the silicone, the way the straps chafed my skin until I bled, and the physical weight of a lie I never asked for. I had to learn how to waddle, how to rub my back like it ached, and how to look at my father in the eye while he patted my bump with a look of pure, heartbroken disappointment. IV. The social execution. Watching your reputation die while you are still in the room is a unique kind of torture. The news of my pregnancy spread through our small town like a plague. I went from valedictorian to the cautionary tale. My best friend's parents blocked my number. I was removed from the debate team because a pregnant teen was considered a distraction. I remember sitting in the cafeteria alone, feeling the silicone belly sweat against my skin, watching people I'd known since kindergarten whisper behind their hands. My mother loved it. It made her look like the saint who was supporting her troubled daughter. The murder of a future. The day I lost my scholarship was the day I stopped feeling like a person. My mother stood over me as she made me type the email to the university admissions board. I had to tell them that due to a surprise pregnancy and personal circumstances, I would be declining the full ride. I watched the send button click, and I knew my life was over. My mother hugged me, the first time she'd touched me in weeks, and said, "This is the price of keeping this family together." I wasn't a daughter to her anymore. I was a shield. 6. The business trip conspiracy. The level of coordination between my mom and Mr. Sterling was sickening. Because Sterling was my dad's boss, he had total control over my dad's schedule. About a month before the due date, Sterling assigned my dad to a critical site audit, 3 states away. It was a 10-day trip that required my dad to be off the grid. My dad didn't want to go, but Sterling told him it was the only way to secure the promotion that would help him support his grandchild. My dad left, shaking the hand of the man who was currently plotting to steal his wife and ruin his daughter. The legal hijacking. While my dad was 500 miles away, my mother checked into a hospital in a different county. She used my ID. She wore a wig and a mask, claiming she was the grandmother helping her terrified 18-year-old daughter. I sat in that recovery room, a teenager who had never even been on a real date, while a nurse handed me a baby that was actually my sister. I signed the birth certificate as the mother. I was legally bonded to a lie before I was even old enough to buy a drink. When my dad came home and saw his grandchild, he sobbed. He spent the next 5 years being the best grandfather to a child that was actually the product of his boss's betrayal. 8. 5 years of domestic hostage. For the next 5 years, My mother turned me into a ghost. I was allowed to go to a local community college, but I was never a student. I was a cover story. She refused to hire a nanny because people would talk. Every time I had a big exam, she would suddenly have a migraine and force me to stay home with the child. She would scream that a mother's place is with her child, gaslighting me into performing the role she forced on me. She used my dad's money to pay my tuition, using it as a bribe to keep me quiet. "Who would believe you now?" she'd ask. "You've been lying for years. You're just as guilty as I am." 9. The professional sabotage. It wasn't just my education, it was my career. I tried to get internships, but my mother had put my name on everything: daycare records, medical bills, and pediatrician forms. I was legally a single mother with no child support. No law firm or high-stakes company wanted to hire someone with that much baggage. My mother had effectively ensured I could never be successful enough to leave her. I was stuck in her house, raising her child, watching her play saintly grandma to the neighbors while she went on work lunches with Mr. Sterling. The gala, the final straw. The breaking point came with a gold-embossed invitation to the 10-year anniversary gala for my dad's company. Mr. Sterling was the guest of honor. My mom insisted we all go. She bought me a dress that made me look responsible and motherly. She wanted to parade her secret child in front of her lover under the guise of my shame. She even told me to make sure the 4-year-old called Mr. Sterling uncle, so it wouldn't look weird when he gave her expensive gifts. The handshake that broke the world. At the gala, I stood in a room full of people who had whispered about me for 7 years. I watched my dad walk up to Mr. Sterling. My dad shook his hand and said, "Thank you, sir, for the promotion. It's helping me put my granddaughter through the best preschool." Sterling looked at the 4-year-old and smiled, a look of pure, disgusting ownership. I realized then that my dad was the only person in the room who wasn't in on the joke. He was working himself to death to provide for a child that was evidence of his wife's infidelity and his boss's cruelty. XII, the nuclear reveal. During the open toast segment, I walked to the stage. My mother tried to grab my arm, but I pushed her back. I took the microphone. The room went silent. "I've spent 7 years being a character in a play," I said. "But tonight, the show is over." I projected a folder of evidence on the big screen. The emails from 7 years ago where my mom ordered the silicone bellies, the text logs with Sterling, and a photo of the fake belly I had hidden in a box as insurance. I looked at my dad and told him the truth. "I never slept with anyone, Dad. I wore a suit. I lost my scholarship for a lie. This isn't your granddaughter. It's your wife's child with the man standing next to you." XII, the aftermath. The silence was deafening before the room erupted. He just walked out. He hasn't come home. Mr. Sterling is being investigated, and his wife has filed for divorce. But now, my mother's family is going nuclear on me. They're calling me a snitch and saying I ruined a 4-year-old's life. They say that since the damage was already done to my career, I should have just kept the secret. My mom says I repaid her generosity by making her homeless. I'm 24 years old. I have no degree, no reputation, and a birth certificate that says I'm a mother. But for the first time in 7 years, I am not a lie. The unexpected ally. In the middle of the wreckage at the gala, something happened that I never expected. My former best friend, Sarah, who had been forced to stop talking to me at 17, was there with her parents. After the reveal, she didn't look at me with judgment. She looked at me with pure horror and grief. She realized that I hadn't messed up. I had been a victim. She walked up to me, hugged me while I was shaking, and apologized for abandoning me when I needed her most. She told me right then and there, "You aren't going back to that house. You're coming with me." The new reality. I've been living with Sarah for the past few weeks. She and her family have been incredible, giving me a safe space to breathe for the first time in 7 years. But breathing is hard. I have started intensive therapy to deal with the complex PTSD of being a living prop for my mother's affair. My therapist says I'm grieving the death of the girl I was at 17, and honestly, some days it feels like I'm learning how to be a human being all over again. The child's confusion. The most heartbreaking part. The most painful part of this entire situation is the 4-year-old. Because my mother's life is in shambles, I've had to maintain contact for the sake of my daughter. But the damage is done. The poor girl is in a state of total psychological collapse. She has started having massive, screaming tantrums, where she throws things and then just collapses into tears. She looks at me, then looks at my mom, and screams, "I don't know who my real mommy is." Every time she says it, it feels like a physical blow to my chest. My mother, instead of being comforted, just gets angry and tells her to stop being dramatic. It makes me realize that my mom never loved either of us. She only loved the image of us that kept her safe. I'm now working with my dad's lawyer to figure out the legal nightmare of the birth certificate. Because even though I'm not her mother, I'm the only one who actually cares about her well-being. The fallout with my dad. My dad is a shell of himself. He's staying in a hotel and refuses to speak to my mother. He calls me every night, mostly just to apologize. He says he feels like a failure for not seeing the silicone belly, for not questioning the business trips, and for letting me lose my scholarship. I tell him it's not his fault, but the guilt is eating him alive. He's helping me fund a private tutor so I can finally try to go back to school and finish when I started 7 years ago. The final verdict. My mother's side of the family still thinks I'm the villain. They say that by choosing the truth, I've confused a 4-year-old for life and destroyed a man's career. They say I should have waited until the child was 18 to tell the truth. But I spent 2,555 days living a lie. I spent my youth as a ghost. I'm 24. I'm finally in therapy. I'm finally living with a friend who loves me. And I'm finally starting to remember who I was before the silicone belly and the secrets.